United Party for National Development, led by President Hakainde Hichilema, has been making frantic efforts to be able to restore fiscal stability and, of course, unlock economic growth. We have seen several initiatives ranging from MoUs that are intended to be able to unlock economic growth for Zambia and ultimately improve the livelihoods of the majority of Zambians. Today on The People's Space, we will be exploring Zambia's investment and economic landscape. And of course, I'm joined by a Special Assistant to the President and Advisor for Finance and Investment. And this is none other than Jito Kayumba. The name is Winston Mavoro. Welcome to People's Space. Jito, it's great to have you.
Thank you, Winston. It's really an honor to be here.
So as we get started in our conversation on this particular podcast, we have a tradition. First of all, we know Jito is a famous man, you know.
Okay.
Okay, anyway, you might not know, but we know.
Okay.
We know. So, you know, a lot of people know who Jito is. Jito is always found with the president, you know, does all these things for the country and blah, blah. But we want to know, you know, you are one person that obviously has an impressive career, you know, spanning from venture capital, you know, investment strategy, and now you are serving in the highest office of the land. So if you were not in this field, what would you be doing?
That's a great question. And thank you so much for that. I think that first and foremost, I think of my purpose. And I think everyone in any career has to think about why do they do what they do in terms of in service to humanity and what brings them the most fulfillment. For me, what gives me the greatest amount of fulfillment is helping people and helping them transform their lives, creating a pathway to a better quality of life through the provision of employment, or even enabling them to have the capacity to create value in their lives and to enhance their income. So obviously I'm in investments, and that's the reason why I went into investments. But to answer your question, I think I would actually be somebody who's more of an educator, either a university professor or a teacher, somebody who's involved in activities that help convey knowledge, particularly to young people. Because I'm a big believer that what builds a nation, ultimately, more than minerals, more than anything else, is the quality of personnel that you have. It's the human capital. So, and I believe that as a country, we need to have a very deliberate effort, not just from government, but even as citizens. Are we spending enough time with young people, not only providing encouragement and motivation, but data, skills, mindset? How do you turn a young budding entrepreneur into the next Zuckerberg, or somebody who can build factories, create jobs, and make their society better and be a job creator? So really, I'd love to be an educator. And that's something that, who knows, maybe down the road in my life, it's something I'll certainly do.
Interesting. So beyond, you know, the impressive work that you do, which obviously is for the greater good of the country. And, you know, for me, I must say, I think that's what a lot of us should be able to begin to tune our mindset to,
Sure,
living beyond yourself.
Yes.
But you know, as men, we have hobbies, we have interests, we have all these other things that we do. So who is Jito beyond this entrepreneurship drive, beyond this guy that talks about investment, that encourages us to be able to become economically self-sufficient?
Sure. Well, I think one thing I'm most proud of is really being a family man. I love family, children, being around basically those that I love, right? And of course, friends as well. And that grounds me as a person. And I should have actually started with my faith. I'm somebody who's a deep believer in God. And I always correct people actually that I'm not just a believer in God, but a person who knows God. It's like, you know, I know you're Winston and I know you're Winston. I don't just believe that you're Winston, right? So, and that connection that I have and my Christianity is really a very big driving force in everything I do in my life, professionally, privately. And because I've come to learn more, and I think my venture into the public sector has really opened my eyes so much, and that even my hobbies have shifted. I mean, you know, in my past life, when I was a private citizen working in the venture capital space, I mean, after hours, I could go hang out at Chicago's, you know, have a drink and do the usual things that the young men do. But now you find that I could basically agree with some marketeers in China and say, let's have a conversation about how we can sell more tomatoes. Or I could, you know, go on a drive just trying to understand who owns what. I see a building coming up. I say, owns that, and how did they get that project going, or how can I help foster growth? So in a way, the private life is connected to my work life because there's so much fulfillment from that. So really breaking it down, it's a person of faith, a family man, a person who's passionate about development, passionate about community engagement, doing community soccer, in Chainda, and not just Chainda, sorry, Baulen, and many other areas. We're trying to do this countrywide. And so that really is the core of the sort of person I am. And really, I love people. I love interacting. I'm quite an extrovert. Which is a huge difference from how I was growing up. I used to be very shy. I used to be very awkward, and there's reasons for that. And I feel like what breaks you out of your shell is the curiosity around how can you become a better person, a more impactful person. And I think I'm an open book. And as you said, many know me because I've been somebody who has opened up on social media about my activities. And there's certainly parts of my life that I keep private deliberately. I'm a believer that what they don't know, they can't destroy. And what you value most, don't overshare. So
interesting. What you value most, don't overshare.
Yes,
okay.
don't share.
Interesting lesson. Let's now get into obviously the meat of our conversation for today, which is obviously looking at various aspects of our economy and investment. There's been a lot of initiatives that we've seen, government roll out with one purpose, which is to improve the overall economy for the betterment of the Zambians that are listening and watching us right now. 2024 is gone. We're now in 2025. How would you assess the state of the economy as we speak?
Yeah, and that's important to touch on. And I'll draw on a very important word you used as you made the introductory remarks, is that our efforts are frantic. Frantic because of the expectations of the Zambian people on the president. And that's something he promised in the lead up to the 2021 elections. And that's the expectations he aims to live up to. He will deliver. And the process is really in motion towards delivering. And to answer your question, one has to certainly provide context on where we're coming from. It's almost like describing a patient who would have died a few years ago, but that patient is now breathing and perhaps walking. Say that patient had broken legs, but there's an expectation that no, we want this patient to run, but the patient is not yet ready for that because of what had transpired. We had inherited a very big mess, and I'll be very frank with that. Some in the political space may not like those words, but these are facts. Numbers don't lie. The economy was shrinking at a rate of basically 2.8%. Of course, inflation was extraordinarily high, just in excess of 20%. Of course, that began to turn around when this government came into office. I'll touch on the fact that the significance of our debt stock was one that was so large that it's very difficult for anyone to do anything developmentally without getting rid of debt, because that liability needed to be paid. And of course, the volumes of funds within our fiscal space were meant to be utilized to amortize that. So in the absence of a restructured debt platform, you cannot move forward. So this is why the first couple of years of this administration were not only to scope what the degree of the mess there was, or the extent of we needed to diagnose the patient. Essentially, we knew, and the Zambian citizens knew that the patient, which if you want to call the patient Zambia, was in a very critical condition. This is why we had to change the doctor, and essentially, and that was discovered. And we realized that before we restore the capacity of this person to run, let's work at the heart that pumps blood, which essentially is the fiscal space, and making sure that, of course, the debt was restructured, making sure that we put in cost controls. The president was very particular about issues of dealing with corruption, ensuring that we're recovering funds that were misappropriated. Of course, expediting the legal efforts. We've got the Financial Crimes Court, ensuring that the rule of law was restored to remove issues of gadas and all sorts of things that actually constrain economic growth. Now, I am leading up to the specifics around the state of the economy, because I needed to give a bit of context that you're shrinking, you've got high inflation, you've got a situation where, I'll give you an example. When people talk about, say, the cost of fuel, right? Because cost of living is a very topical matter. Now, people have to realize that why do we have almost $1 billion of debt towards oil marketing companies? It's because those that came before this administration essentially accumulated debts. We're making fuel available at a cheaper rate because they're not paying for it. Now, who has to pay for it? It's us. So we had to rationalize the situation, removing certain obstacles that essentially would give us not only the fiscal space but the capacity to develop, which includes remove of subsidies, getting into an IMF program. These are tough decisions, but it's all for the betterment of the patient. It's like a bitter pill. No one likes an injection. No one likes the taste of having to, not only be on a specific diet or cutting out certain foods that are bad for you, which is what we had to do to get to a point where we there's light at the end of the tunnel. And really the circumstances, and we can certainly recognize that it is tough. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. And that things can be better and things will be better. And when I think about the trajectory of our economy, I look at it from a couple of perspectives. One is the past. Two, it's what we can do to correct the wrongs of the past to create a better future, because we're in transition. It's very difficult to talk about the status without talking about the fact that the initiatives currently underway are actually taking us towards growth. Where this year, and you can mark my words because this is on record, we will have a minimum of 6% GDP growth.
Interesting.
Which minimum. And this is coming from initiatives. You talked about MoUs. We're talking about transactions that are currently at play in sectors that are highly impactful towards steering the country towards not only greater job creation, we're talking greater forex earnings. We talk about the currency performance. We know that citizens out there on a daily basis are posting, when FNB or Zanaco post the currency rate, they show it in order to almost measure the performance of the economy. We appreciate that because the sensitivity of the rate of the exchange rate is connected to the cost of living and the cost of doing business, cost of many things, because we're a net importer as a country. But this government is doing so much to substitute imports. We are going to be fertilizer secure because there's so much in terms of look.
Just before you get so much, I know that there's a whole lot that you're doing in key sectors, and we will get into that. But right now, I just want us to get out of the way. You mentioned, when you started, you were talking about, some of the steps that are being taken on the fiscal front to be able to lay a solid foundation, even for these investments to unfold in these critical sectors. I'll zero in on the IMF, ECF, the extended credit facility. We saw some of the progresses or the milestones, that it led, such as, the debt restructuring progress and, ultimately just the fiscal consolidation that we're looking for to be in a position where we can breathe and do all these other things. And debt, as you highlighted, was the biggest issue that, the regime, the UPND regime has to deal with at the moment. What are some of the progresses that you can single out, big progresses when it comes to the, ECF from the IMF? And what kind of challenges remain to bring us to a place now where we can say, okay, we are now out of Egypt. Canaan, here we come. The descending is now starting into the promised land.
I like that. No, thank you for your guidance and steering me back on the path. And I know if I do go off, please bring me back. Now, the point is, and I like the analogy you've used because there's so much that could be borrowed from that Moses story, that we definitely went through a very tough time with Pharaoh, right? And then that's not a political statement. I'm connecting it to the Egypt story.
Is this the Mingalato now starting to kick in? But anyway,
we'll keep it. It's good to keep this fun and relatable, so it's okay. So now the point is, we saw all the difficulties. We know that we need to move to the promised land. One of our biggest obstacles on our journey was the Red Sea. And the Red Sea, economically speaking, is actually the debt stock. Restructuring was splitting it. And that's, to me, one of the best analogies one can come up with regards to the journey. And guess what? That journey that Moses undertook to deliver, the people to the promised land really was a difficult one. Sacrifices needed to be made. There was impatience. Some were even saying, I think the Pharaoh's better. Let's turn around. Right? But the promise that's ahead of us is so much better. Now, going back to the specifics around, the successes relating to the ECF, the engagement with IMF, and I will say, if you look at the past, attempts were made to engage the IMF, and they were failed. to a point where there was frustration and where there wasn't even a resident representative for the IMF for years, because even the IMF were not seeing this government or the government at the time as being a credible one to deal with. This one comes in within months. There's a staff level agreement. Next year, things progressed very quickly because of the credibility that exists within the presidency, as well as, of course, the Ministry of Finance, the central bank, and the like. And I think Zambians can appreciate that there's stellar people of high caliber in those roles that are really, working and acting in a manner that is absolutely aggressive to achieve that. Now, of course, there was the removal of subsidies. Very tough decision, because you're cushioning the cost of various things, whether it be food, fuel, and the like. But we know that money has to be created. You have to create value. And this economy was not creating the kind of value that allows for us to be sustainable from that perspective, because the overarching theme is debt sustainability. And that's what this ECF is all about. And of course, not only having a facility that deals with some of the fiscal gaps, which we've been scoring at every single milestone, and we're seeing those results come through. And so not only are we up to date with the processes and expectations of the program, we're also delivering specific results. If you look at the import cover of our Forex reserves, it's actually rather safe. We're talking about 3 months or so. It's north of $4 billion. You're looking at issues of us being able to cut where we needed to cut, wasteful expenditure, plugging the gaps. It's one thing to activate economic growth that pulls funds into the bucket, so to speak, but the bucket had holes, and those holes are essentially corruption. And if you look at the 3 principles around dealing with ensuring that the Treasury is operating optimally, you're talking about, one, making sure that goods and services are procured at the right price, making sure they're delivered on, in a timely way, and that you're maintaining quality. And that's something that we've been very particular about. And then also touching on the fact that, why is it possible that we can provide free education even with fiscal challenges? Why is it possible that CDF can be deployed in excess of $1 million a constituency in order to allow for the betterment of citizens across the country? It's not only because of fiscal consolidation and ensuring that the cost-cutting measures are implemented, is that there's a huge focus on really the allocation, the allocation of the budget, which, again, with the leadership of the president, which is highly meticulous and methodical, is able to make that happen. So really the trajectory is strong. And the last point I'll make with regards to the successes and a few challenges, in fact, with regards to the program, I don't see any challenges. The capacity of the government to amortize debt is enhanced because the debt stock has been falling. And then secondly, the domestic arrears have also been shrinking, which is a very good thing. And then also, we've thought outside the box of how do we finance infrastructure using the PPP model, the roads, among other things. So with that being said, there's so much that can be counted as success, but there's so much to be done, because what truly gets an economy going is more private sector investment, where the Treasury can essentially take in more inflows of taxes from the operational efficiencies and growth of the private sector who pay tax at the end of the day. So that's really where we are driving to.
You are watching The People's Space with me, Winston Mavor, and of course, my guest today is Jito Kayumba, Special Assistant and Advisor to the President for Finance and Investment. And of course, we are looking at the Zambian economic and investment landscape. Now, I've got some great news for you. For those of you that are our followers and keenly follow this particular program or podcast, I would also invite and extend a great opportunity. You can win some amazing prizes, t-shirt, caps, mug cups, and so many other prizes that we do offer. But all you simply have to do is invite 10 people to like and comment on this particular program, which airs on Facebook page, Center for Trade Policy and Development, and also on YouTube, Center for Trade Policy and Development. On TikTok, it is CTPD Zambia. On IG, Instagram, it is CTPD Zambia. And of course, on Twitter, it is CTPD Zambia as well. So invite 10 people over there, especially when we share this particular particular episode. Invite 10 people, interact with them, and you will stand a chance to be able to win those amazing and fantastic prizes. For now, we'll take a short break. We'll be back on the other side. And of course, we will look at what are some of the things that are materializing. We've seen President Hakainde Hichilema, sign a whole lot of MoUs. And when I say President Hakainde Hichilema, you may not have seen him personally do it. But remember, ministers, cabinet ministers in key ministries are an extension of the office of the president. So by virtue of that, we've seen those progresses, but how far have they gone? Are those things actually even being implemented? Stay tuned. Jito will come and tell us.
Hello, people of Zambia. I'm Brenda Chitindi. Catch me on People's Space Podcast.
Welcome back to the People's Space. My guest is Jito Kayumba. And of course, we are looking at the Zambian economic and investment landscape, getting some insights into what really is happening on that front with one goal. How does it positively impact the majority of Zambians? And of course, to provide those answers, I've got Jito Kayumba to be able to talk to us on the platform. But remember, I mentioned earlier on that this show is called the People's Space for a reason. It is your platform. So it is not just you watching us talk about key issues, but we also want you to be able to benefit from certain opportunities. And when I talk about opportunities, we are offering a chance for you to win fantastic and amazing prizes ranging from mug cups, t-shirts, and of course, other accessories. All you simply have to do is invite at least a minimum of 10 people to be able to comment on the Center for Trade Policy and Development page on Facebook and YouTube, especially on any of the episodes. And the post that has more interaction will definitely be picked and the winner will be given. You never know. We might also just give you a chance to be able to meet some of our amazing guests. Hey, I'm just speculating here before my producers kill me. But Jito, let's get into the conversation. So President Hakainde Hichilema, let me not even use President Hakainde Hichilema. I know when I talk to you, I'm talking to the president right now. So we've seen quite a lot of, MOUs in key sectors, energy, mining, and there have been MOUs, just to cite a few, and these MOUs have been entered into with strategic countries like Mozambique, Angola. You talked about the issue of the fuel. There's the DRC, the neighbor here, that is producing a whole lot of energy transition, green minerals, as they call them. And there are all these MOUs and commitments that government has entered into. But we want to know, signing and announcing is one thing.
Absolutely.
But seeing it being actualized is another.
Absolutely.
So where are we?
I'll answer that question by telling you a short story about my, late grandmother who, she passed on many years ago, but she used to always come to tell me, at the time I was single, and she'll say, Jito, I want grandchildren. Where are my grandchildren? I would say, Granny.
That's actually a very good question,
Exactly. It is a very good question, right?
For them, though. Oh, okay.
Continue.
For them.
Don't worry. No. If we want to talk about what Zambians want to see in terms of economic value, projects that are actually not only creating jobs, but paying tax and the like, let's use the children example. But let's also look at two other factors. One is the sequence of events that need us to get there and the time. This government has been in place for 3.5 years. Now, we have to be very realistic. And I think we are at fault, and I'll be first to admit, in our ability to communicate how these things are going from the time you sign to the time it comes to fruition. Because every single project has a gestation period, like a child, 9 months. Now, imagine the person you're asking whether or not, or essentially the one you're encouraging to produce grandchildren, doesn't even yet have a girlfriend. So he has to go and look for the girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, of course, she accepts and, you get engaged and ultimately you get married. And the conditions for a child to come into the world are best under marriage, right? And ultimately, things have to happen. She gets pregnant. 9 months later, the child is born. So imagine the journey from that till the success. And this is why I mentioned that based on the sequencing and the time frame. I'll touch on a few points. Number one, a mine. How long does it take to develop a new mine? You need to explore. After you've explored, and of course, exploration comes at a massive cost. There's aerial surveys, geophysical, and the like. There's drilling. There's mine development planning. There's capitalization, sinking of a shaft, we're talking sometimes on average 5 to 7 years, right? That's way longer than even the time this government's been in place. How long does it take to build a hydropower plant? Again, not exploration, feasibility studies, identification of the area, the environmental studies, the capital raising, the power purchase agreement, you name it. Again, of course, there's some projects which are faster to do than others. I touched on the sequencing of the events when it comes to how do you first and foremost, if you want to deliver value for the Zambian people, you scope, you resolve the legacy issues, you get the debt issue out of the way, you create a platform for investment to now take place. So when you now are talking about where we are, and by the way, this has happened at a painstaking and frantic rate. Obviously, you have to restore Zambia's image in the international community, because guess what? In the absence of the liquidity, the capital to invest locally, you have to engage elsewhere, because guess what? What developed Singapore? What developed all these countries that rapidly went from being third world to first world? It was external capital, because that money was not there in the country in the first place. They leveraged on various things. So this is why you may have noticed in the first few years, the first 2 years or so, the president did have to travel a lot, and it was a necessity. Some may politicize it, but the fact is, when you're in the room where decisions are being made about the livelihoods of people across the world, if you're not in the room, decisions will be made in your absence, and you end up wondering why you didn't get your fair share of an opportunity. So being there was very important. So again, I'm giving you a bit of a picture. I don't want to make it sound too long-winded, but really coming down into we identified key strategic sectors that we will use to get Zambia not only out of its state of poverty and where there's limited inflows of tax into the treasury, but into a place where you have significant surplus that does create enough we call it dry powder within the finance space, right? We talk, it's a slang word for capital. We have enough cash in the treasury so that you can make not only school free, but you can have, development capital to develop the country. Now, let me start with mining. Why is mining so important? Mining literally built Zambia. Without mining, there literally would be no Zambia. Even the colonial masters who came over 100 years ago, they came and found that this is a place where we can extract minerals and we can go and utilize it to develop, our own jurisdiction. Now, the fact of the matter is, if we look at Mopani, you look at KCM, you look at Luanshya, all these mines were built in the 1940s, 1950s, way before we even became a republic and when we were under colonial subjugation. Now, all of that obviously built some of the infrastructure that we inherited in 1964. Moving on, if you look at the rate at which the copper was being produced from 64 all the way up to now, it was on average about 500,000 tons on an annual basis. Now, what was being produced, and this is a very interesting story because, and again, I don't want to there's so much to be explained, but I'll try to sum it up as much as I can. We were 3 million people in 64. You've got roughly 500,000 tons. Now imagine what was being shared based on the quantum of production and the availability, the number of people. It means that this is why it was very possible for people to have a relatively good life per capita wise, because our per capita copper production was very high because we were less. Today we're 20 million. We have more mouths to feed. And this is why we have to drive more investments into the sector. So ultimately, our first president, KK, definitely went on his own developmental drive, leveraging on the mining sector, because the proceeds that kept the Zambian economy going was the mining sector. The copper belt would not exist if it went for copper. Now, we came in to restore that, brought back Mopani, brought back KCM, Luanshya mine, the dewatering. Mines that were about to leave and close, that were going to create so much misery. Take Solwezi, for example, a place of,
I like, Jito, the fact that, you've brought all these mines to life and, there's hope for renewed investment.
Sure.
And, longevity of relationship that is mutually beneficial. But others have argued and said, well, bringing mines is one thing, but actually benefiting, I'm trying to look for a better word, benefiting appropriately from those mines is another. And I know there's a mechanism, at the Bank of Zambia, the export earning mechanism, that was introduced and everything. And I've heard from some circles that the minings have actually said, no, Jito and Boss HH, you guys are dreaming. We are not going to do this. Now, others have said that measure is good, to be able to allow us to earn more money,
Yeah.
to stabilize the currency, to ensure that the capital that you're talking about, part of it sits here. So maybe speak to that a little bit.
Sure. The benefits from the mines, it's a very topical, very sensitive issue because it's very emotive because Zambians recognize that, first of all, the minerals that sit beneath our soil are God-given. It's that we are privileged that it's there. So therefore, what's there, the proceeds we must enjoy. Now, how do we enjoy those proceeds? First and foremost, to get it out of the ground, you need capital. This is why you have entities, firms, leveraging on science and technology and all those capital elements to get it out. Now, because they have to go through the process of raising money, they obviously create companies and where there's a beneficial interest by way of shareholding. Now, that's the first way that we benefit, is that we negotiate better shareholding in these businesses. Take Mopani, for example. The historical picture was that Glencore was the majority shareholder. At the time when the previous government took over that mine, what happened after they took over? The value of the mine went down to negative, in fact, zero. Now, essentially, and the debt that mine had, or that the government had, or Mopani had with Glencore was over $1.5 billion. So it was literally limping. It couldn't even produce more than 100,000 metric tons. So the point I'm trying to make here is that now that we created this transaction where we could be, somewhat 49 to 51% partners, where capital is brought in, we're now going to essentially benefit, and in the process of benefiting by way of increase the trajectory of the growth of the mine. In fact, the worst that it performed was about 64,000 metric tons. Already 40% growth is being felt by the mine. So already, as shareholders, we're benefiting. Number two, employment. That mine literally was not only about to close, but we rescued it from closing. Two, you had 1,700 new jobs created by that mine. So already the benefits are being accrued to us as shareholders, as well as an engine for employment. Suppliers are now able to engage the mine and get paid, Zambian suppliers. And we're creating policies, local content policies, to ensure that Zambian suppliers are beneficiaries. I will personally be going there, following up to make sure that Zambians are involved, whether it be from Kitwe, from Mufulira, and other places. The third is the taxman. Mining contributes 40% of our tax revenue. And the fact of the matter is we're able to provide free education, all these things. So already the mining sector is benefiting us. In fact, we've taken it to a point where, over 800,000 metric tons of copper was produced last year. And, what's also very exciting about that is that that's really taken us to a point where we are on our way to that 1 million. We'll breach the 1 million mark this year, on our road to 3 million metric tons of annual production. So one has to ask ourselves, okay, what more can we get from the sector? Aside from the employment, aside from being shareholders who get dividends, aside from being a tax earner, 30% of their profitability obviously comes in the form of tax, income tax. We have this pay as you earn. There's mineral royalty tax. I mean, if you also compare the benefits that we have in the mining sector, do an analysis across the world. How much does Chile, which is one of the biggest mining or copper producers in the world, and other countries that produce copper, how much they tax the mines? So we really have to change the narrative of this conversation from how much can we sit and wait to get in terms of benefit, to how can we now be miners ourselves and own mining companies? That's truly where the problem lies from a mining perspective in our country. And the growth is very clear across the board, across the country. And, we're talking 9 transactions last year that came through, from Kitumba mine in Mumbwa to Kasenseli mine in Mwinilunga to the mine in Kalengwa in Mufumbwe, Mopani, Luansha. I mean, it's phenomenal. The great Mingomba is coming in Chilawombwe. Of course, more to come with KCM and the like. So I can go on, right? But I'm keen to get your guide in terms of, in fact, maybe if you can permit me, A lot of these transactions came about because of MOUs. The president went to Abu Dhabi to meet his counterpart. MOUs were signed.
Okay.
That MOU led to the Mopani transaction. You know, the president, you know, he opens up doors for transactions. He went to China. People used to talk, oh no, this government is very pro this, pro that. They don't want to go to talk to China. Now our relationship with China has never been better. Those MOUs that were signed in China, what's happening? Tazara is coming back. There's already investment going on into revamping Tazara. We have dewatering at Shaft 28. You have expansion at NFCA mine in Kalulushi. You have just so much going on. You've got road development. You've got rail. An MOU that was signed in the US is essentially taking us, and of course in collaboration with the Angolans and the Congolese, is taking a rail route for the first time in Zambia's history. We'll be able to access the Lobito Bay on the west coast of Africa through the Lobito corridor. So the list is endless, but the actions are literally manifesting, and people will see for themselves. I show people, this is the reason I do these videos. You see me walking on the ground and showing people, and say, Sontapa, look at what we've done, right? And there'll be so much more to be seen. Let me just conclude by saying this. We have, the public have said, we want grandchildren, we want babies. We've done everything. We're not at a point where, you see, others can't even say that there was somebody to make babies with. As we've gone past marriage, basically we are pregnant as a country. You see, that's how far ahead we are from a developmental standpoint. And what will essentially happen as we get into the end of, 2025, and I touched on the fact that we are going to achieve in excess of 6% GDP growth. This is coming out of these transactions, from MOUs to execution to fruition.
So briefly on this, Jito, I know you can go on, but just briefly on this. Recently, I think there was the issue of the 15%,
I'll touch on it.
Tax, exactly. Government, introducing this particular policy, direction in terms of taxation, and then, coming back to say, okay, after further consideration, I think for now we can hold off on this. People have come back and said, well, you guys are behaving like you don't know what you're doing. Others have yet again said, you're being twisted. So are you really being twisted? Are you guys being twisted? And when I say you guys, just for the sake of context, please, I'm not talking about Jito and the president. It's government. It's the collective. Okay, so it's government. So briefly on this before I move on.
That's a very important, and I'm glad you raised that, because clarifications are important. And people, politics can be such an impediment to not only development, but when people are being misled and are riled up to have certain views, it actually removes our ability to do things that actually creates a better life for our citizens. Given the fact that citizens definitely want to see progress, and when we have things that are put in the atmosphere that essentially takes them off the actual truth of what's happening, it means that they're less inclined to participate and less inclined to have faith in the in the process, which obviously is problematic. Now, let me give you a bit of background. We're talking about export duty on the on
precious stones. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, were we collecting 15%? No, it was not there. And the global standard for most of our competitors, because guess what? We're in competition with Brazil, with Colombia. It's not there. We were looking at ways in which we can raise more money so that we're more debt sustainable, right? So you look at, okay, can we add a tax there so that we can make more money from that sector? And this is a conversation our great colleagues in the Ministry of Finance have on a regular basis, is where can we earn more money for the benefit of the Zambian people? But we also have to do it recognizing that there are people who are going to be affected. That the road to hell sometimes is paved in good intentions. You might think you're doing a good thing to help the patient that is essentially on a road to recovery, but actually what you're doing is worse. Let me give you an example. Okay, no. Let me take it back to the point of the fact that we actually weren't collecting that. It was an idea that was mooted. We're talking about January, that why don't we introduce 15% so we can make extra? So the first lesson people should learn is that there was no loss, because some were trying to twist that that's a tax that was there that we've taken to zero. It was already zero. We just changed it. We put it out there that we're going to impose this. After consultation, imagine you sell chickens. You're exporting chickens as a Zambian farmer. And we come and tell you that, oh, you're exporting chickens. We're going to put 15%. Every time you export, you pay extra 15%. Then Here's the thing. Say you're selling your chickens to Tanzania, but guess who's also selling to Tanzania? Malawi. A chicken in Malawi is say, for example, has 0% export duty. We still collect tax, and let's not forget that those same semi-precious stones and so on, there's still 30% income tax. There's still 6 or so percent mineral royalty tax. They're still taxable. We still make money from it, and we are shareholders in Kagem and the like. So we benefit still. So it's not like we've taken away the value for the Zambian people in that. So let me go back to the chicken narrative. You are competing with the Zimbabwean or with the Malawian in selling chickens to your customers in Tanzania. Say we tax you, then you come to us to complain. If you make this tax, if you implement this tax, essentially, we'll pass on that cost to our consumer, and it will make us less competitive. And the next thing you see that the Tanzanians start buying more chickens from Zimbabwe and from Malawi because yours is too expensive, because we put tax. And then you close your company. How many people did you employ? Say you had 200 employees. They're now out of work because we wanted to get more revenue from you in order for us to, of course, have more revenue in our treasury, but we killed your business. So now we've taken the little revenues to get from you. It's now gone because we choked you. So people also have to put themselves in the shoes of these companies. Their plea to us was very genuine. They said, look at the tax rate in Brazil on emeralds and the like. Look at the tax rate in Colombia. Those people who do those auctions will go there. They'll stop coming here. And that's a fact. And actually, the auction that was meant to take place in Zambia was postponed because, but we can't compete. And people are now saying, are we going to even maintain the staff complement if we can't sell the emeralds at a competitive rate? So those companies were literally going to essentially go into a situation where it's almost in receivership. So this comes from consultation. And I think any responsible government needs to talk to the private sector to understand what's going on. We need to be better at explaining to people that this is what's going on. So we're still earning. We literally just decided that, you know what? We have made a decision not to implement this new tax. By the way, this tax used to be there in 2019. And at the time, it was removed by the previous government because it was uncompetitive. So people, even the people in the opposition, if you will, who are now saying, no, that tax should be there. I said, but you're the one who removed it in the first place. We thought it'd be ideal to reintroduce it, but we also realized that we get why it wasn't there in the first place. So that's what happened. So I hope that provides context into why that export. It's just one aspect. But otherwise we're still earning from that sector.
Okay. So like they say, everything that goes up must come down. So as we start, unfortunately, our descent on this conversation, the majority of Zambians right now, Jito, obviously want to see these investment pledges that you highlighted and cited begin to actually take effect in their lives. For me, if you talk about mines opening in Solwezi and everywhere else, it doesn't matter if I don't have money and if power goes for, God knows, 27 hours out of 24 hours. All these things don't make sense to people that are listening to us right now.
Correct.
So let's bring the conversation home with regards, how can all these begin to translate into tangible benefits for the majority of Zambians?
Absolutely. And that's why we're here. And that's the most important question, is because an investment has to accrue in terms of value to Zambian people. Zambians are already benefiting from the enhancement of the growth in the mining sector. Indirectly, let me give an example. If we are collecting more export revenue from the mining sector because of the increased production, there's money for free education. If all our children are benefiting from that, our society is benefiting. We are, of course, making sure that, and by the way, we know that this power deficit that we have, what occasioned it? This is not to, make excuses or to pass the buck, but the fact of the matter is 85% of our power generation came from one source, and it's been that way for too long, since 1964. We've changed that. And if you saw what the president announced just barely days ago about the solar explosion, you are going to see roughly 1,000 megawatts of new energy coming on stream this year, which is not dependent on hydro. So even if we have another drought, Zambians still have access to electricity. We're driving investment in Mamba. So the fact of the matter is, the argument of load shedding and the issues associated with that will no longer be the case by the time we're getting to the mid 2026. But the significant decline in the deficit will certainly be there. We're talking by the end of this year. You will start to see hours improve. Already people are seeing from having only 3 hours a day, it's gone up 7. Next will be 10. By the time we're getting to the mid-mark this year, you have a significant more amount of power. And that is, and we appreciate the resilience that the Zambians have shown as, under these very tough circumstances. Now, we want to also make sure that the agricultural sector is driving growth so that not only do we have food security, because guess what? The drought affected our capacity to grow food. We had to import. The depreciation of our currency also was impacted by the fact that there was huge amounts of imports. Now, when we resolve the power deficit, the economy will definitely be back on track, which is certainly on course. And also the fact that our food security is definitely more assured this year because we've had better rains. But also the president, in fact, he just had a meeting just yesterday about irrigation, that even our agricultural sector doesn't have to wait for the rains, that we'll be able to produce at all times. Because there's countries in the world like Egypt, like Israel, who are very aggressive from an agricultural standpoint, even without a significant amount of rain. So we need to be intelligent. Let's use science to make sure that there's food security. These are things that the Zambian people expect and want. Of course, jobs. We want to make sure that Zambians not only are people entering jobs, but also job creators, making provisions of capital. There's been huge sums of funds put not only into CDF, which of course there's still teething pains. It's not yet optimal, but there's more Zambians benefiting at a local level than ever before. There's construction of new schools and multiple elements of empowerment happening on the ground. And you know that the reality is not many are willing to come out and say, hey, I've received CEC money, because people are afraid of being disliked. There'll be envy that I received money. But the fact of the matter is more than 300 million kwacha has been deployed. This is bigger than any other time in the history of our country. So the fact of the matter is you've got more Zambian entrepreneurs who are not only self-employed, but are creating jobs. You've got jobs in the mining sector. You've got also, public service jobs. There's more teachers than ever before being employed. You've got recruitments in the military, recruitments in the healthcare sector. And all of this is really translating into Zambians being on the path to having a better life. We're still on course, but we know that things will be better.
You mentioned something interesting, when you talk about the exchange rate.
Sure.
Obviously, this one you have to be as brief as you can. I know it's a question that requires unpacking, but for the sake of time, you have to be as brief as you can. We've seen the Bank of Zambia announce, the rebasing of the currency, or the introduction of new notes.
Yes.
Yeah, the introduction of new notes, so we just clear. And others have argued and said, why are we introducing new notes? Is it because all of a sudden, is this a political move? Is this an economic move? There's been a whole lot. Remember, I like the fact that you acknowledge that communication can be better for everybody else. On that, I give you marks. Others have said, well, maybe it's a political move. Others are saying no, but the experts have come on board to explain, to say, look, there's an animal called inflation that we're trying to fight and ensure that we keep contained. But at the same time, other schools of thoughts have argued and said, well, the idea or the intention is good, but it's only addressing the symptom and not the problem. Your thoughts on that?
You see, development has to be multifaceted. It's not a silver bullet. That alongside a kwacha resilience policy, there is a policy coming that essentially will ensure that we implement the law that already exists, that the kwacha is the sole legal tender in this country, that you can't transact for domestic transactions in another currency. It's the kwacha and the kwacha alone. So accompanying that, you have new notes. So there's an entirely new way of handling basically monetary policy. And Zambians have to be proud of their own currency. And the reality is, and even technology has shifted. Currencies, it's very easy, especially that, some of the markings and the manner in which the current notes are produced is that they could be counterfeited. We have to move with the time. So this is really it. I mean, if you talk about the existence of these same notes, it's been quite a long time. We're talking a decade or so. So the fact of the matter is we're just modernizing. People have to look at this as a progressive move, to move with the times. And also, here's the reality. If your biggest note is 100 kwacha, right, and you compare the value of 100 kwacha versus the biggest note in the US, that there is a bigger note than 100 US dollars, but the commonly known large note in the US is 100. If you think about from a value perspective and how much you need to transact, say for example you're buying large quantities of goods, instead of carrying a big bag of notes, at least with 500 kwacha notes you can carry a lesser amount, right? It's also for convenience and things of that nature. It doesn't have a negative impact on the power of the currency. It actually should make life easier for those who are transacting large volumes. There are many people who do cash business and they need the quantum of notes that can enable them to have more efficiencies. So it is a package, it's a portfolio of interventions to improve our monetary situation. And of course, currency stability will be there. Not only are we going to ensure kwacha resilience through the sole legal tender policy, new notes to modernize, to be up with the times, but also we need to enhance. You see, there's only so much you can do from a monetary side without addressing the fiscal side. We need to create more industry that brings in more forex earnings. This is why we're driving more export earnings in the mining sector. And there's also been growth in the non-traditional exports, and you'll see more of this.
Okay, so I have successfully borrowed 2 minutes from my producer. So under these 2 minutes, Jito, as we close, you are an investment expert. I mean, you've been in this field for a long time. Just briefly speak to some of the major challenges that as a country we are facing when it comes to attracting investment, whilst also telling us the remedies to those challenges. And you can close it off by telling us how you guys, and when I say you guys again, it's the government, are going to make Zambia a premier investment destination.
This is something
and we'll wrap it up.
Thank you so much, Winston. This is something that's already on course. From the day the president got inaugurated, this is something that he's been, very proud to foster, that Zambia is a phenomenal investment destination. This is being seen in the numbers. Look at the number of tourists coming to Zambia. Over 2 million people for the first time in Zambia history coming to Zambia. You look at the numbers from ZDA. These are actualized figures. Of course, there's commitments, pledges, but these are being actualized. You've got battery manufacturing, you've got mining, you've got solar, you've got all these that are in motion. So already, for the evidence of Zambia being a premier investment destination can be seen. Talk to transaction lawyers, corporate lawyers, bankers. They'll tell you that the amount of movement of currency into the accounts is very significant. They're tracking a lot of that. But of course, that will be seen. We're manifesting. We're in that period of actualization, which is very important. So I don't see us as being in a situation of challenge from a perspective of attracting investment. It's really an issue of time for these seeds that have been planted to bear fruit. That's the challenge. It's the time frame. We've only had 3.5 years. Of course, we have an election next year. And of course, we're very proud to be in a democracy where the Zambian people have a choice to obviously renew or not, of course, the mandate that the president have. But we're certainly confident, given the fact that not only will a lot be seen, but the benefits will certainly be there. So with that being said, I believe that in the long run, Zambians will have a far better quality of life than they have today. They will have access to power. They'll have access to good food security. They will have access to more jobs. There'll be more liquidity in the economy. We'll be more productive as a nation. Our mindset is changing, especially from a production perspective. The president calls people to work. Work after work is part of the theme of this presidency, because of the fact that some in the past thought that people should just sit and wait to be given something, that you stand in line and collect. But no, we're going to grow our own food. And we're proud of the fact that Zambians stood up and actually went to the fields to grow, and they'll benefit from that. And the reality is we have to be more optimistic about the future of our country, because optimism is a driving force towards being positioned to be part of the growth trajectory that we're about to embark on. And we really call on Zambians to not only open their eyes and be closer, to listen to what government is working on and be participants. And, there's always going to be naysayers. And there are many who profit from negative propaganda because they've got political aspirations. There are some out there who want this government to fail because the failure of this government is their success, because ultimately politically they benefit. But it's all about ensuring that we're patriotic and that we're moving with one voice towards a better Zambia.
Thank you for coming through, Jito.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so you've been watching The People's Space, and of course, my guest today has been Jito Kayumba, Special Assistant to the President and Advisor on Finance and Investment. And we've been discussing the Zambian investment landscape and, of course, touching on some of the current economic trends, both on the economic side and the fiscal side of things that are happening in the country, trying to break them down to understand and just to see how we can benefit from those things as Zambians. And earlier on, I had indicated that we are giving you a chance as people that follow and watch this show closely, that you can simply win some amazing prizes such as capes, t-shirts, mugs, and of course other things by simply inviting 10 people to comment on one of the episodes of the People's Space podcast, which you can find on the Center for Trade Policy and Development Facebook and YouTube under that same handle, whereas on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, it is CTPD Zambia. There you can tag at least a minimum of 10 people, interact with them, and whichever comment gets more likes and interactions definitely does stand a chance to win some of the amazing prizes, including some that have decided not to mention, but of course, I can tell you, you do not want to miss out on them. The name is Wenson Mavor. Thank you and see you next time on People's Space.